I'm Nick Armstrong, and you're watching Dear Fort Collins, a podcast featuring the people that make Fort Collins a wonderful place to live. This series of episodes is all about the election that's happening in November 2025. And we're interviewing all of the different candidates for mayor, city council, and PSD school board. And we want to hear from them in their own words about why they're running, what they care about, and you then can be more informed about who you're voting for when it's time to fill out your ballot. With ranked choice voting, it's really difficult to know sometimes who your candidates are and what order you're going to rank them in. So I hope these series of episodes really help you figure out which candidates best align with your interests and needs. And as we do these interviews, I want you to know that I have given the candidates access to the questions in advance. I try to ask all of the candidates the same questions, or at least give them an opportunity to answer the same questions in the same kind of way. And there's very minimal editing on any of these episodes. So unless there was an errant sneeze or a cat jumping on someone's lap, you're hearing from the candidates in their own words. I do have a quick disclaimer to give you that I serve on the Parks and Recreation Board for the city of Fort Collins, and my opinions on this show are my own. They're not the position of the board or of the city. And I have also advised a number of the candidates about their campaigns, and in some cases have either helped with their campaigns or made a donation here or there. I do my absolute best to make sure that they all get fair treatment, that there aren't any favorites being played, and that also we're asking them the same types of questions and they have an opportunity to answer those in kind. I hope that you enjoy these episodes and that they help you become a more informed voter in the upcoming election. And if you do have any questions, concerns, or comments, please let me know and reach out on the Dear Fort Collins website. I'm always happy to hear from you. And some of the questions that you'll hear me ask of the candidates have been submitted by listeners and watchers just like you. Folks who are fans of the show and want to know more about particular candidates and their positions on particular things. So with that, let's get on with the show. On today's episode, we have Sabrina Herrick, who is running for the Poudre School District Board in District C. Sabrina, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, tell us about what motivated you to run for school board.
So my reasoning for running is actually a very personal one. I don't know if you remember the situation a couple years ago with the bus paraprofessional who was abusing autistic children, Tyler Zanella. There ended up being 164 charges against that guy with 11 named victims, and my daughter was one of those kids out of the 11. And you know, I looked at that situation and was just like, how does something like this even happen? And, you know, so in my search for answers, I started attending board meetings regularly. And I ended up with a list of things that I'm like, okay, we really could stand to work on these things in the district. And I basically built my campaign off of my observations there.
First of all, I'm sorry that happened to your daughter. And I think that is a tragic issue that we as a community needed to lean into and pay attention to. So I'm glad that it actually put you in a spot to take a leadership role and explore what that means for you. What unique experience do you bring that will help you serve the PSD families effectively?
Well, because of that situation, I feel like I've seen some of the worst of what can happen in PSD. You know, there's other cases that have come out of PSD, obviously, and I don't try to play the game of which was worse on that front, obviously. But because of that experience, I have seen some of the worst of what can come out of a bad experience at PSD. And so I'm coming into this with a very empathetic look at how we can make things better for our kids and make sure they're having a good experience. In addition to that, you know, I do have some work experience over the years that I think will be beneficial. I have quite a bit of management experience, but I also have the experience of being the underappreciated grunt worker. And, you know, given that I'm looking for a role in management, but also will be, you know, in charge of people that are very often underappreciated, I feel like that's a good perspective to bring where I've seen both sides of that situation. And, you know, I'll be able to empathize with everyone and try to find good solutions because I understand where both sides are coming from.
I want to dive into your hope to bring a better student experience around in just a minute, but can you share a project or a policy or an issue that you'd like to tackle first if elected?
So I feel like there's a few very good choices for that. But the thing that I really think needs handling first is my experience watching the board has been, and also leadership in general, has been district leadership has this level of toxic positivity, I would call it, where they really want to rug sweep issues that need to be talked about so they can be handled. And what I'd really like to be a part of is turning that into more of a culture of continuous improvement. You know, we're going to acknowledge there is a problem here and we're working on it, and we're still going to celebrate the good things that are going on. But, you know, leadership is first and foremost going to be looking at, okay, so we need to work on these areas. Let's get that under control.
So is that more of a sense of allowing issues time to breathe so that they can be explored more thoroughly and the solutions then mapped a little bit better?
I don't know that I'd call it giving it space to breathe, more of a, you know, just as an example, over the couple of years that I've been paying attention to the board, you know, I've seen several issues come up where, you know, parents are bringing concerns about their disabled child being abused by a staff member. And I look at things like that, the fact that it's been, you know, even outside of the 11 kids involved in the Zanella case, it's been multiple staff members at multiple schools, at multiple grade levels. And after a while, that starts to feel very systemic. But I feel like it's being handled on a case-by-case basis. Like someone brings something to the board and goes, hey, why is this being handled like this? And then they're like, oh, you know, let's go ahead and step in and direct some people to make sure this gets managed appropriately. I'm looking at it and going, this feels more like a systemic issue that needs to be treated as such, and it's being handled on a case-by-case basis. So that kind of thing.
Taking a little bit of a wider lens, what do you see as the most pressing needs of the Poudre School District students right now?
Stability. I'd say stability. You know, we got a lot of crazy things going on in the world that have a lot of demographics very worried. You know, situations like ICE and, you know, anti-trans laws and things like that coming down the pipeline, budget cuts to the school district. I think the main thing that our students need, especially when we're trying to help them succeed in life, is just a source of stability.
So talking about the idea of how do we make our schools more safe and inclusive for communities that are worried right now, the LGBTQ community, the multilingual learners, and also those students with disabilities, how do we make sure that our schools are safe and welcome and inclusive for all students and staff?
I'd say there's a few parts to this. You know, each one of these demographics has very specific issues that they're facing. You know, for example, the issues that our Latino students are facing are not necessarily the same issues that our Black students are facing, or our LGBT kids, or our disabled kids. It's all very specific to, you know, that demographic in a way that I think the first thing that leadership needs to be doing is sitting down, shutting up, and listening to our students and to our parents who are in those demographics to hear their experiences and hear what they see as the needs. But as a general concept, I think the most important thing we can do as a whole is just bring a culture of respect and insist that that is the culture that will be at PSD, that we are going to recognize differences between our students and celebrate those because, you know, each person has had their own lived experience, and part of that comes from the demographic that they are part of. And that we need to treat that as an opportunity to learn from each other and not an excuse to other people for having a different lived experience. And I really think that, you know, that is a very base level thing that we need to make sure that we are bringing to the district, in addition to listening to the specific needs of different demographics.
Corona talked about setting baselines during her interview as well. And I think that it's really important, the idea of not spotlighting individuals and putting the work back on them to explain to us the needs of their particular demographic or their circumstances, and really having space for that to be shared. What?
Oh, definitely. And I also do consider it, kind of a balancing act, because as members of leadership, I feel like the board has an obligation to be looking into this themselves and, trying to find this information and not just demanding that, the members of the community do all the work for them. But at the same time, they need to make sure that they're making that space for the community members who do want to help them do that work to help them with that.
Expanding on that lens just a little bit, what role do you believe that the district should play in helping support mental health for students and staff?
I consider it to be a imperative at this point. The way I see it, the school's job is first and foremost to educate kids. We can't do that if we can't get kids to come to school because they don't feel safe, or if they're just so distracted during class that they don't feel safe. So mental health and helping the kids feel okay while they're in school, it's absolutely a priority that has to happen. As far as helping the kids, I think it really comes down to just making sure that we are making those resources available to them. And at the same time, we also need to make sure that we are creating and making use of a feedback loop from those counselors to district leadership, so that, when kids are coming to these counselors and saying, hey, I'm facing these very specific issues, be it a general issue that they're having with a teacher, or just stressing about graduating and what after graduation is going to look like, or if it's something that's specific to a demographic, we need to make sure that that feedback is making it back to leadership so leadership can make decisions with it.
I like the idea of a feedback loop between staff and the counseling staff that are at the particular schools. We've seen walkouts by students across Colorado this month because of school shootings. What does the safety mean to you in the context of a school? And how will you support students who are rightfully worried about the safety of their education?
So it's kind of a interesting question to me, especially because of some conversation I've been having following the shooting at Evergreen High School. I came into this with safety being a very high priority for me. But school shootings was not necessarily one of those topics that was like, if I was going to list like top 3, school shootings was not like, I'm going to like bulldoze my way through making sure something happens here. Let's put it that way. So it's one of those things, because of the stuff going on, especially with the new Evergreen shooting, I've been trying to look into it more. And after the Evergreen shooting, Brian Kingsley did send out an email talking about some of the stuff we have in place. And the thing that I have heard, though, as feedback from the community is they really want to hear more open conversation from the board about what's happening and how we're going to handle school shootings. And obviously, the board doesn't want to be sitting here and going, okay, so if there's a shooting at Rocky High School, we're going to step 1, do this. And then when the opportunity arises, evacuate through these doors or something like that. We don't want the details to the plans out there that much, because then it's something that can be taken advantage of. But I think one thing that we really need to bring into conversation is general concepts. When is the last time that our schools went through and, developed their plans for if they do need to do a lockdown? Since that plan was put in place, have new concepts come out that can assist and potentially be better? How much have we evaluated those? Have we brought in experts in these new systems that can teach our principals new ways to manage a lockdown in their own school. I think these are conversations that we can be having publicly without handing over information that would put our students at risk, in the middle of a shooting situation. And I think that would be beneficial, not only on the basis of making sure that we are as prepared as we can be, but also giving the community a sense of relief to know that we are talking about this, we do have plans, and we are updating them as often as we can.
So on that topic, how do you see the district partnering well with families and the broader community?
I think a lot of it comes down to just making sure that we are being available for conversation. I see the community as a great source of information. I look at the board as 7 people that have all had, their 7 experiences, and then we got the superintendent and the cabinet. And, but then we have a district of some 200,000 people. That's 200,000 lived experiences that are going to have ideas and experiences that can bring new ideas to the table. And I think it's very important that the board is listening to those ideas. During consolidation talks, so many people came forward with ideas. And, board members more recently have been talking about, community comment during meetings has been very helpful. And people from the community have brought forward ideas that they're now looking at implementing. And I really think it's important that we make ourselves available to have those conversations and listen to people, ask curious questions specifically, and, make sure people have an opportunity to be heard. Because people are going to bring forward ideas that maybe we're like, hey, I would love to do that, but we can't afford to right now. But we should still hear it, even if it's something that we can't implement. But there's also going to be a lot of ideas that we can implement. And we should make sure that those people have an opportunity to tell us so that we can get these things rolling.
In your view, is there a right way for teachers, administrators, and families to collaborate when those questions come up about the district's priorities, and in particular around budgeting and school consolidations?
I'm a big fan of community building in general. So, teachers and parents and leadership all teaming up together to tackle a topic, I think is a really great thing to have happen. Because we are going to get all of those viewpoints and lived experiences to be able to say, okay, so this is a good idea, but it doesn't take into account this particular thing. And so I really want to build opportunities for people to be able to get together and talk about it. And I really want to build a culture of we're tackling the problem, and we're attacking the problem, not just we are attacking the person who came up with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a mindset that we need to have in general in the world today. And it's the kind of thing I'd like to make sure that, I'd like to contribute to it at PSD.
So school consolidation is one example, but knowing that the partnership with like Front Range Community College, for instance, drives some of the schedule choices that the district makes. How do we optimize education, teacher work, and prep days, and the need for in-classroom education from the board and communication level?
So, one thing I've heard repeatedly when it comes to scheduling, is, well, we have to start when we start because of when Front Range starts. Here's the thing about that. I have a friend who's attending Front Range Community College this semester. And so I happen to know that my 7th grader started school 4 days before Front Range Community College started. Because, I was talking to her that weekend in between when they started. And I'm like, are you serious right now? We're starting this, we're claiming it's Front Range, but Front Range hasn't started yet, and we already have. So I really, at this point, I want to take a very close look at everything with a critical eye. I think we need to just at this point have a culture of asking the hard whys and finding those comprehensive answers. There are going to be times where, we ask the hard why and someone will have the answer of, I don't have the best answer for you. Let me go dig through some stuff and get you the best answer. And I think we should be open to the fact that that is going to happen. But I do think that we need to be first and foremost asking the hard why questions on why are we doing this way? Why can't we do it this way? And finding those answers that we need so that we can come to the best solutions.
Yeah, and driving some of those discussions or even complexities beyond the scope of the district, such as state standards and whatever else for numbers of minutes in the school each day and so on. But
exactly, and sometimes that will be the answer, and we're stuck dealing with that, and we have to accept that. But I feel like we're going to come to the best answers if we ask those questions and get that confirmation, and insist on confirming that that is what it says. And that is how we have to do it, so we're going to do it that way.
So knowing that parents and families are, often in their own worlds, and it's not always possible for everyone to tune into the BOE meetings every so often, what is your approach to ensuring that all families feel informed and included in conversations about education and issues happening at PSD?
So I know we already do some newsletters home and things like that. I like the idea of expanding that a little bit more. I feel like our newsletters could include things like, hey, we're having a board meeting next week and this is the agenda for it, kind of thing. And just expansions on the general concept of newsletters. You're in the district, you're going to get an email, and that at least gives you an opportunity to read it. If you don't read it, then you don't read it, but it was there. It's another opportunity to be aware of it and to know what's going on. And I think we should be looking at options like that. Also, the district is doing listening sessions already, just community listening sessions. I think that's a great concept. I love that. I want to see more of it.
How do you think that PSD should approach class sizes and staffing and resource allocation in the years ahead, knowing that the mill levy was just passed?
That is the tough conversation right now, because data does show that in a lot of classes, it varies a little bit by subject, but in a lot of subjects, smaller class sizes are going to be what benefits the kids the most. And with the budget situation being what it is at the state level, at the federal level, we may very well find ourselves stuck in a situation where we have to just do the best we can and, have class sizes not be the ideal that we would like them to be. It really is the tough conversation at this point, in my opinion. But I'm definitely in favor of, keeping class sizes small as much as possible. And I like the idea of doing things like, constant evaluation of, school borders for what kids are going where to try and help manage that, things like that can help keep our class sizes small, in the face of declining enrollment in this school or, increased enrollment at this school. Maybe we can adjust things around to try and help that, to try and keep our class sizes as close to ideal as possible.
What do you see as the role of the PSD board in supporting teachers and staff to help reduce burnout and improve retention?
So first and foremost, the board is the one who's approving the budget. And one major thing that I've heard across the board from staff at this point is, pay and benefits. We got to make sure the pay is competitive. We got to make sure the benefits are competitive. And we got to do the best we can by our teachers. Another thing, I was actually having a conversation with ACE, the non-teachers union, I guess you could call it, earlier today. And I was talking to them about some of the issues that they see on their end. And some of the feedback I got from them is that the classified staff is seeking out opportunities to be more involved in things like meetings where they'll have an opportunity to, share ideas and interact with the teachers on, a behind the scenes level. And they're also seeking opportunities for training. And I think although all three of those things are very important things that the board can have a hand in shaping for our teachers and staff and other staff.
What do you see as the board's role in addressing disparities in student achievement across different schools and neighborhoods?
So when I look at that situation, it's not even necessarily an issue of neighborhoods. It is to some degree, but it's also across different demographics. And I think we need to tackle the situation from that perspective that there is a level of, you know, it's some of it's neighborhoods and incomes in the neighborhoods. Some of it is, marginalized groups, and we need to be looking at it from that perspective, finding out, identifying what those factors are, figuring out what the needs are for that area and addressing them on a neighborhood level and a demographic level to, better help our kids that are falling behind.
We've talked about a lot of different things where we want to put emphasis and resources. How are you planning to prioritize when resources and budgets are tight?
The best thing I can say about that is I'm going to be looking at it from what is going to be best from the kids, or depending on how bad the situation is as far as the budget, what is going to be least harmful to the kids. That is going to be my driving factor. And looking at a lot of the stuff that I've seen in discussions, the way I see it, in most cases, what is going to be good for the students is also going to be what's good for the staff. I feel like those are very heavily tied. There's a few exceptions, but for the most part, what's going to be good for the students is going to be what's good for the staff. And so those are my two driving factors: is first, what's going to be good for the kids, and then what's going to be good for the staff, because what's good for the staff is going to benefit the kids.
So knowing that most of northern Colorado is growing, and with that growth focused in Fort Collins and Timnath and Wellington, how should PSD plan for new schools and facilities and balance that with the needs to refurbish existing facilities?
I did have a bit of a laugh when I saw that question, because I was just like, oh, if that comes up, that is going to be a very awkward conversation with people. Especially given we've been talking about closing schools potentially in Fort Collins, turning around and saying, for example, picking on Timnath, but, hey, now we got to build another elementary school in Timnath, while people in Fort Collins are just like, but you're closing 5 of our schools. That is going to be a very awkward conversation. And I found myself thinking, man, it would be so much easier if we could just hoist up one of these under enrolled schools in a helicopter and move it to another area. That would make things so much easier. But, given the situation that we are in with under enrollment in the buildings that we have, I think a major role that the board should be taking in this is having conversations with, city councils and zoning committees and things like that, and having those hard conversations like, look, we have this school, we have under enrollment in this. What can we do to try and encourage population growth, especially, family population growth in these areas where we already have the buildings, rather than us, shutting down 5 schools in Fort Collins and then having to build another one in Timnath or Wellington or something like that. I feel like that's the more sustainable option, to at least have those conversations first before we start talking about building a new school in an area that's already growing. Let's have those conversations. Let's ask the whys. Let's ask the hows. And if it turns out, if after all of that it comes down to we do need to build a new school in an area, and still close down schools in another area, well, that's the hard truth of it. But at least at that point, we can say we held our heads high and tried.
I love the lens and the approach of intergovernmental collaboration, in particular because for larger municipalities, and going between CSU and the city of Fort Collins, that's how you got things like the University Center for the Arts and the Gardens at Spring Creek. So I know it's possible to do really interesting things, whether that's a building swap, no helicopter required, or if it's something where we can, talk about proactive growth planning or facilitating growth along, transit corridors or other things like that, that makes it easier to get students to school. all of those options on the table are much more likely to happen if there are folks that are focused on looking at how government agencies can collaborate more intentionally.
Exactly. And, going back to like some of the issues that I've seen just watching what's going on in the boardroom, I feel personally like PSD has a habit of, acting very insular, like this is an internal problem, we're going to handle it internally. I feel like they need to take more time reaching outside of PSD. This is a very tight-knit community. It's honestly surprising to me sometimes how tight-knit different, nonprofits and elected officials and this, that, and the other thing are. I'm like, oh wow, everyone in a position really does know each other, and I look at this and I just think we need to be taking advantage of this. We need to be collaborating with each other because there are things going on that it matters. We need to handle it, and collaboration is going to be the best way to handle it.
So we talked a little bit about listening sessions. We talked a little bit about collaboration, and then knowing that a school board role is one of the most visible roles in local government. How do you plan to engage with families and students across the district?
The big thing with that is I want to make sure that there's opportunities. I one of the complaints about the listening sessions that we have going now is the timing. It seems like they're always at the exact same time, one after another. And, that's great for the parents that are off work at that time. Not necessarily great for the parents that are always working at that time, but would like to attend. So, I think we need to be thinking about things like that, where how can we create opportunities for the parents that are currently missing our listening sessions to engage? How can we create opportunities for students who can't make it to the board meetings to give community comment because maybe they're in a sport? Make sure that they have an opportunity to engage, which I did actually hear a public commenter say that recently, that it was a student at one of our high schools who was saying, a lot of kids can't make it to these board meetings because, they're in a sport, they got an after school activity and it overlaps. And so they're just kind of out of luck on that. And it's kind of frustrating. And so I think we need to be making sure that we're creating those opportunities for in-person engagement, so that people can interact as much as they want to.
Are there any community perspectives that you feel are missing or that you'd like to seek to amplify as part of your candidacy for those opportunities?
Yeah, so as I'm a queer woman myself, and then I'm coming from a situation of disability rights as my inspiration to run. So those are the two that I feel most capable of amplifying personally, but I do also want to be the kind of board member who is accessible and reliable, that if someone comes forward and says, hey, I'm part of this marginalized group, this is an issue that we're facing, I can be relied on to listen to what they're dealing with and try and help create solutions for them so they don't continue to face those issues.
Awesome. Well, Sabrina, we're in the moment where we're talking about rapid fire questions. Whatever comes to the top of your mind as I ask these is just fine. And if you feel like you want to dive into something in particular, feel free to do that. We're going to start off with, what is your favorite local coffee shop?
So I'm not really a coffee drinker, but if I'm going for hot chocolate, I'm going to Tandem Squared. If I'm going for hot cider, I'm going to Mugs. If I'm going for tea, I'm going to Wolverine or Lima. I got my list from hanging out with the people who do like coffee.
I love it. What's your favorite park in Fort Collins or nearby?
Oh, it kind of depends. Adora's convenient for me. But I do also enjoy Twin Silos and Friend of the Giant. I think they've got great playgrounds, and my kid loves going to both of those.
The school subject you loved the most as a student?
Oh, definitely science. I was very much a science nerd.
Which school subject did you like the least?
Never been a math fan. Like I've always managed to get through it. was solid B student in math, but was not my favorite.
What's your favorite book?
Oh, there's a lot of good choices there. I got to go with Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. That's an excellent one. Are you familiar with it?
No, tell us more.
So it's a very strange concept for a book, but basically it's a telepathic gorilla teaching a man how the world came to be this way so that he can be part of the solution to make the world a better place. And it's great. I love it. Very strange concept that when you describe it to people, they're like, seriously, but it's amazing.
Worth a pickup at Poudre Libraries or at Old Firehouse then, huh?
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome.
But also, if you get your own copy, do not loan it out to anyone. I am on my third copy of that book because people keep stealing it from me.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
Yep.
Would you consider yourself an early bird or a night owl?
Definitely a night owl.
If you had to pick one word to describe PSD schools today, what would you use?
I got to go with promising.
And one word that you'd like them to embody in the future?
Actualized. Feel like those two go together.
Yeah, absolutely. Promising to actualized. It sounds like a journey. That doesn't require a telepathic gorilla, I think. What would voters be surprised to learn about you?
I mean, the thing with this question is always my life just feels normal, but I've been told my last job was very weird by my friends. So I got to go with the medical research is the weirdest job I've ever worked and led to me having some very interesting experiences. Like I got to walk dogs on a treadmill for science.
That's incredible. Most people are like, hey, wait, you can get paid for that? I'd like that. Let's go.
Yes, I did. I got paid to walk dogs on a treadmill for science.
Incredible. We'll post the job notes in the show notes for you. Who do you look up to as a role model in public service or education?
I got to go with, so this is going to sound really funny, Mr. Rogers and Mr. Rogers. Because first off, we got Mr. Rogers from the TV show. Absolutely loved him. Loved his show as a kid. And, shocker, my daughter is autistic and autism is at least partly genetic. And my favorite thing about that show was the trolley as a kid. Are we shocked here? But, that he was just such a kind person, always looking to make the world a kinder place. And I'll be honest, the situation where, there were people arguing about pools in the 60s and, black people being in them, and his response to that being to invite the black actor from a show to sit and put his feet in a pool with him. That is a level of petty that I aspire to be. And that is the kind of activist that I aspire to be, that I'm just, to just be like, I'm doing this to prove a point. That I love it. The other Mr. Rogers, though, would be my history teacher in high school, who, when he wasn't teaching us the important dates, was teaching us important lessons like history is written by the victors, teaching us about media bias. And the funny one he taught us was, if you're ever going to make a paper model of a B-2 bomber and throw it down a hallway, make sure that either one, you check around corners first, or two, film it.
It sounds like a fun project.
Yes, it was. And we did, in fact, film it, fortunately, because that thing got thrown and it went around a corner and smacked someone in the face, and we got it on camera. That was a very entertaining day on the high school news feed.
Well, you got the film it part down. Then the checking around the corners, maybe not so much.
Yep.
One of two isn't bad. Besides a helicopter to move schools around, if you could have one superpower to improve PSD overnight, what would it be?
I would like my brain to contain a little black book of all of the perfect contacts for any given situation. I just know the phone number and email for the expert who's going to be able to give us good advice on that.
Awesome. And what do you hope PSD will look like 20 years from now?
Let's put it this way. I listened to the board talk, and I love a lot of the things they're saying. I want to see, they say things like, we support transparency, we support LGBT kids, we support disabled kids. I feel like what we're lacking at this point is follow through on those statements. And so what I want to see in the next 20 years is the follow through.
Well, Sabrina, is there anything else that you'd like the audience to know about you or your campaign?
The only thing I'd really add to this conversation, I feel like we've had a great conversation here, is I consider myself to be an activist and an advocate first and foremost, and a vote for me is a vote for the person who's going to be a pit bull and latch on and handle that problem and not let go until it's handled.
Where can voters learn more about you and your campaign?
So I've got a campaign website. It is smhforpsd.org. That's M as in Michelle. And then I also have a Facebook page that you can follow the updates on, questions that people are asking me and my responses to them. And that's going to be Sabrina Herrick for Poudre School District. And then there's also an Instagram account that's going to be the exact same posts. And that's going to be smh.for.psd.
Sabrina, thanks so much for being here with us on Dear Fort Collins. Did you have fun?
Absolutely. Had a great time. And I really love your questions. There were several in there that, I had to really think about a good way to answer those. And I really appreciate the hard questions.
It's a lot of fun to be able to sit and chat with folks who are passionate enough and motivated to run for office. And it's such a difficult thing to do, to put yourself out there, and being willing to and brave enough and courageous enough to answer the questions that are put in front of you, I think is a skill that a lot of our folks in the community appreciate. So thanks for running, and thanks for being here with us on Dear Fort Collins, and hope to see you next time as you listen to the candidates in their own words.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. And one thing to keep in mind there, in my opinion, running a podcast is a whole different form of courage that I am not up for personally. So,
it has its moments. I appreciate you. Thank you.